It's the passion, it's the delusion that unites us all. Episode 3, Andrew Wadden, Ari Daniel here with you once again as the Toronto Maple Leafs already just continue to roll without their best player. Auston Matthews is in, Germany right now? Perhaps maybe he's flying over the Atlantic at the moment as we record this to get back to Toronto. We'll get to Auston Matthews in just a moment. Obviously a big story for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But the last 7 games, they've lost one, sorry. Like, they are fantastic without 34. Impressive comeback over Washington. The OT winner by Marner against the Oilers on home ice. Gotta love that, spoiling McDavid's return to his hometown. Blanking Vegas and Boston, who are having their own problems right now. Boo-hoo. And then that stinker against Ottawa. So, I mean, this team right now, for missing its best player, is playing its best hockey of the year.
Plan the parade.
Play the music.
Also first in the Atlantic right now.
That's right. Yeah, they passed it last night.
Right. That'll probably be that'll be short-lived. Top of the Atlantic. That's tough to maintain right now. But we talked about it off the air, so to speak, and there's something about this team, to use your words, they're not as flashy as they used to be, but they still manage to grind out a game and get it done. Is that coaching? Is that experience? Is that maybe some of the new roster additions, mainly the veterans, OEL, Tanev? It's nice to see that this team doesn't have to outscore their problems every single night. We talked in past episodes about the fact that they're also a little bit more of an intimidating team. They definitely can bully their way through games. Last night, I can't say they bullied their way through the game, but they're definitely not a team that any team can push around, get in their heads and win the game like we've seen against teams, especially like Boston or even Florida with Tkachuk. Like, there are players on every team that seem to get into the heads of the Leafs and change the texture of the game. And we just don't see the Leafs as a team that manages to be taken advantage of like that anymore.
You speak about changing the texture of the game. I felt like the Ryan Reeves hit on Darnell Nurse against the Oilers on last Saturday night. I felt that changed it a little bit. Listen, it was an unnecessary hit. It really was. I know people are debating the intention. I don't believe there was intention in the hit. But I believe that it was Reeves, wanting to make a play, if you will. And for Ryan Reeves, making a play is throwing a big hit on the forecheck. That's the style of player he is. He's not going to rack up a bunch of goals for you. You want him to play hard, play aggressive. And I believe that's what he was thinking in that moment. But the hit was just so bad. And, when you see Nurse, spin to the ice the way he did, it's just something you just don't want to see. I understand the 5 games for Reeves. He's a repeat offender. All of that. There is a bit of caution, though, that I think defensemen need to realize in that play. And that is that there's going to be guys barreling in on you, and you got to be careful, which way you're looking. Nurse was not looking in the right direction at that point. Now, is that on Skinner to be calling him out and being like, hey, man on, or heads up, whatever? I don't know what the term would be. I guess it'd be more heads up with a guy coming towards you. So I do believe that, Nurse has to bear a bit of responsibility for this, but let me preface it by saying that nobody deserves to be knocked out like that and get the principal point of contact being your head. So I'm not blaming Nurse. I'm just saying that in that moment, in those moments, someone like Skinner has got to let his defenseman know, hey, there's a big boy coming in on you. But again, like I said, just an unnecessary hit by Reeves and an unnecessary, turn of events for Darnell Nurse, who's now missing some time.
So we all heard it. We all heard our bantam hockey coaches in our heads, or midget hockey coaches in our heads after watching that hit, telling ourselves that old hockey adage, keep your head up. It's your responsibility to keep your head up. I agree with you. A dirty hit is a dirty hit. A hit to the head is a hit to the head. And in that case, let's say he does have his head up. It still probably would have, his head could have been, up, down, sideways, turned around. A hit to the head is a hit to the head. Yes,
Yeah, but he might have been able to brace himself. That is my my
right,
argument, if you will. Yeah.
right, right. And when we talk about trying to keep our head up, make sure that we're avoiding plays like that, it's for the purpose of avoiding a hit for a legal body check. An illegal body check is an illegal body check, no matter which way you slice it. And to your point, that's why he was suspended. Couple things about that, though. Uh, you know, I wish he was able to make a difference like that every single night and keep the play clean. At the same time, though, if you look back to the sequence of events that occurred after the hit, of course, you don't ever want to see a player go down. You don't want to see a player get hurt. The Leafs have to kill off a 5-minute penalty kill because he got a major. They kill it off. The Leafs then get a power play. Well, on that power play, I believe it was Ekholm takes a really bad penalty, a cross check, I think it was, in the crease for Matthew Knies. And I sensed that play was the result of frustration from not scoring on the previous power play. And then the Leafs get a 2-man advantage, and the game completely turns around. So interestingly, Ryan Reaves was a huge difference maker in probably the end result of that game after that hit. Wish it didn't happen like that, obviously. And at the same time, you watch it and you're like, man, what the fuck are you doing, Reeves? Like, stop being a goon. I'm all about having enforcers. I'm all about trying to change, like I said, the texture of the game with an enforcer or with some roughness and some toughness. And you don't want to see a play like that happen, and you wish it didn't happen, and you wish he didn't get suspended, and you're like, maybe we don't need this guy. Maybe he's a little useless. Then the hit last night rolls around on Matthew Knies, and you're like, fuck, I really wish Ryan Reaves were in the lineup tonight. It's a weird dichotomy.
Well, I'm glad you went there. So Whitecloud hits Knies, and I mean, feet leave the ground, shoulder to the head, and no penalty. Now, obviously, there was penalties afterwards because Benoit went after a Whitecloud. But, I mean, what are we talking about here? Now, I don't think the two are the same, but there's one thing that they both had, and that was the principal point of contact was the head. Right? So, listen, the NHL Department of Safety is an enigma for a lot of people. And, do I believe that Whitecloud's going to get a suspension? I mean, we're recording this at what? It's 11 a.m. Pacific right now, the day after. I haven't seen anything come down yet. So, I don't think the two hits were the same in terms of the degree. But like I said, one thing is in common, and that was the head was contact.
Right. I mean, yes. And on one, they're going to have to debate whether or not he left his feet. The hit last night.
Well, you can see it though. I've seen some people argue it. I saw Biz Nasty on Twitter taking on anybody that he won. And I mean, half the time I think that he just does that for the shits and giggles anyway. Does he actually believe in what you're saying? Because I mean, you can go frame by frame and you can see the feet leave the ground. So I don't really think there's an argument there.
So I didn't see what Biz said about it, and I haven't watched it frame by frame, but of course he leaves his feet. The question is, did he leave his feet after making contact? Because there's some
gray area
involved. Well, there's some physics involved with it. You make a connection like that with your shoulder. You're on. Essentially, these guys are running around with knives on their shoes, right? There are things that happen when contact is made body to body. When you if you do it without skates, you make contact with somebody's shoulder. Naturally, after you make contact, you're going to leave your feet. Did he leave his feet before contact was made, I think is what they're going to look at. I also wonder about the whole George Peros thing.
Why? Because he was an absolute goon in his day, and now he's making these decisions.
Right.
Is there a little bit of lenience here? Because, how would George have played it when he was playing?
Right. And maybe that's why guys like that get into those roles, because they know that they're probably, they have experience in situations like this where they're able to make a judgment call in a really, like you said, a gray area play. After, watching, what happened after both plays, there's a little bit of a scrum after the whistle, some fight. I think plays like this show that fighting in hockey has to stay. Because if you eliminate fighting from hockey, you will see a lot more of these types of plays because guys won't have to be accountable. Ryan Reeves he's okay being accountable for a play like that right after it happens. He'll fight whoever. But, another guy who doesn't necessarily fight, like Whitecloud's a tough player, but
he's a big dude. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a big dude. But imagine guys are running around being able to throw hits like that, not having to worry about possibly getting decked legally or illegally the next shift, or having to take on the team's biggest, roughest, and toughest player the next shift. And so I guess what I'm saying is it's very clear the past two Leaf games that, we still need some sort of self-policing in hockey. And sometimes, the self-policing comes from these guys like Ryan Reeves who aren't gonna respond in the most legal of ways. At the same time, I say that out loud, and he wasn't responding to a play the other day. He was just trying to get his team back in the game.
He's just trying to get in on the forecheck. Yeah. I mean, I see your argument. I understand what you're saying, but at the same time too, like with the Department of Safety's got to keep these guys safe. And I think that's the argument really with Knies is because we don't know what the result is right now as we record this. We haven't heard anything about Matthew Knies, but guy gets hit in the head with the shoulder. Like that's something that the league has to, take seriously. So I see what you're saying in terms of the policing and keeping, people, the checks and balances kind of, but at the same time too, like the league's got to hold up their end of the bargain and keep these players safe. And in this regard, if Whitecloud is able to walk scot-free off it, does that keep the players safe, or does that tell the rest of the league that we've got your back? I don't know. But at the same time too, there's people that are listening to this right now that'll probably argue that no, that was clean. Like, what the hell are you guys talking about? You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Clearly you've never played. It's always the argument, but we both did. So, although I never took body checks, nor did you. We're both goalies. That's right.
Right.
There
exactly.
you go. So maybe we can't argue it because maybe we haven't technically played that.
That's fair.
You know who else isn't playing right now is Auston Matthews, as we talked about. So let's get to it. So how did it go from this guy's day-to-day to now he's boarding a flight after missing 7 games to Germany to see a specialist where everybody's trying to like fan the flames down, like, oh, don't worry, we're just taking precautions. Precautions is you go see a doctor in Toronto, the Toronto area. Why you got to fly to Germany? That it's just all of a sudden red flag. Now, Craig Berube did speak to the media this morning after practice, and he said everything went well. Said he's actually improving and in a real good spot right now going forward. We're very happy with that. So more vagueness from the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're not going to tell us exactly what it is. Upper body injury. You can speculate all you want. From what I understand, it's also coming from the Matthews camp in terms of they don't want people knowing the extent of the injury, what it is, et cetera, whatever. But my point is this: you don't fly to Germany for just nothing. Clearly something is going on that is a lot more serious than they're allowing to, get out.
I agree. It's weird. On one hand, it's not serious. On the other hand, he's flying all the way to Germany. But I do wonder if, this is just the way things are going with, the league's elite players and how they're using sports science to their advantage. We've seen, we can just give a laundry list of players, of elite players in the past 30 years whose careers ended far too early because of injury. First one that comes to mind, Carey Price's knee. It can be argued from people like us that maybe if more precautions had been taken, if more load management had been kept in mind, if he had gone to see more specialists, that Carey Price would still be in this league, right? Maybe this is guys are learning over time. Carey Price should still be in the league. He should still be competing for a Stanley Cup. We lost that guy way too early, right? And I think that, as players, take their health more into their own hands, aside from what we saw with Jack Eichel. Imagine Jack Eichel had played that whole situation out in Buffalo and, not opted for the disc surgery that he wanted to have. Maybe Jack Eichel would still be in Buffalo and he'd be, having he wouldn't have a Stanley Cup. That's for damn sure.
He'd have like 4 new coaches as well at this point, because he loved to go through a coach in Buffalo to Jack Eichel.
Right. And so if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, you're thinking this is our generation, this is our generational talent, and we'll keep them out of the lineup for however many games until we're certain that this issue doesn't turn into a bigger issue 3 years from now.
I get that. And look at the record without him. Like, they're doing fine. In fact, if they can just continue to do this, I'd be fine. Like, sit them until the playoffs if that is the case. I'm obviously not going to be the case. But what my point is this secrecy that the NHL is allowed to do. Look at the NFL. You have to put your list of injuries out there. Why? Because there is big money being bet on the NFL every single weekend. And I can tell you, as a gambler myself, I bet on hockey. I would love to know what's going on with Auston Matthews right now. In fact, I'd like to know who's starting in goal tonight for every team in the NHL in the morning. How is this? How they allow? I'm going down on a bit of a tangent here, but how does the NHL allow this? They shouldn't allow it. Injuries should be disclosed. They should have to be disclosed. If you're going to get in bed with the gambling companies, then you're going to have to do these sort of things. Goaltenders, you shouldn't have to wait until, whatever goalie skates out first to know who's going to be in net that night. How are you supposed to fucking bet on that? It's completely ridiculous, but the NHL is allowed to do it. And as long as they're going to be allowed to do it, the Leafs are going to play that game completely 100%. And so are players like Matthews as well. Now, I get what you're saying, though. Like, yeah, we want to get this guy right. Like, we've invested a lot of money into this guy. We make a lot of money off this guy, putting bums in the seats, selling 34 jerseys, all that shit. So I get what you're saying, but the fact that it's just this whole, cloud of secrecy around what it is. Now, you could speculate who knows? I don't know. Like, it's upper body. Okay, sure. Right. So I feel like there's got to be some transparency here, between the league and just, the public, because if you are going to get in bed with, gambling companies and stuff like that, like, if 34 is not in the lineup, you might change your bet. Now, shit, the way the Leafs are playing right now, you're probably still going to put some money on them because they've been playing so well. But that's my argument. But I do see what you're saying in terms of, like, we've invested far too much into this guy. We want him to see the right people. So I do get that. But again, you can't go from day to day to fly into Germany to see a specialist, 3 weeks later.
Do you think that the lack of transparency might have a bit to do with player safety? Not the guy's going to be going around targeting his wrist if they find out it's his wrist.
No, they will. They will. Was it the Canucks game last night? I believe it was the Canucks game last night. Archer Sheloff lost his blocker, and the Rangers still had possession of the puck. So if you know the NHL rules, they don't blow it down until they lose possession of the puck. And they who was it? It doesn't matter. They shot to the glove side. They didn't expose him. Why not expose him? He's lost his blocker. Expose him. And there were people that are like, "Oh, that's Bush, blah blah blah." Hey man, this is pro sports. Like, there's a big money on the line. I just talked about the gambling aspect of things. You score an extra goal, that's an extra couple million for you when you're in negotiations, right? So yes, guys will exploit that. 100% they will. And they should, because they are trying to make a living, and you want every single angle that you can get when you're trying to make this living, because it's your career is usually this long, right? For the average NHL player. So you've got to do everything you can do to be the best at your job. So yes, I do believe that is one of the reasons. Depth scoring is something that the Toronto Maple Leafs just lack. And you did a TikTok on it. I find it funny too. Maybe I'll flash it up on the screen here and I'll show it up to the listener. We had one guy sort of like debating the facts, and all you did was point out the facts of it, right? Like, it's just completely ridiculous. There's nothing to argue here. If they're going to be, a team that's going to do damage in the playoffs, because as we've talked about, these are 82 games of dress rehearsal right now for the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? If you are going to have success in the playoffs, well, first of all, you got to score. That has been an issue for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs regardless. But you got to get it from these guys that you don't expect to get it from time to time. They have 8 goals from the bottom 6 forward group right now. 8. Kampf, Domi, Reeves have nothing. 0. Goose eggs. And, you can throw Connor Dewar in there, but he's small sample size right now. Fraser Minton makes his season debut, the youngster, gets the call up, scores in his first NHL game this season, plays close to 16 minutes. Like, listen, if Fraser Minton is going to be able to do that sort of thing, then keep him up here, because at this point here, they have to get some depth scoring. They're not going to be able to win, those grinded out games in the postseason where, those top six forwards sort of neutralize each other. It's that bottom six is going to be where it is going to be. You're going to find success. And right now they are finding nothing from it. Now, don't get me wrong. We praise this team. They're first in the Atlantic, lost once in the last 7 games. That's all great. But if you think that you can just slide by, come the postseason without getting people that are, putting the puck in the net that you wouldn't expect, I would argue that you're wrong.
I think it's worth pointing out that Minton happened to be on the ice with, the likes of William Nylander when he scored his goal.
Beautiful setup.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a setup. Willie, that's Willie Styles right there, man. Yeah, sure. Right. I get it.
And yeah. And also, Holmberg popped his first last night, and I was on an empty net. And don't get me wrong, I like when I think about all these guys in the bottom 6, I like the idea of them. But you're right. They're not producing on the score sheet, and they're going to need to. And it's miraculous that they haven't been, and the Leafs have still been winning. So it just goes to show that this top-heavy strategy, at least right now, it's obviously working.
It works in the regular season, though, Ari. Works in the regular season when the game is a lot different. I mean, look at the Leafs. Even in past, like even the top guys can't score in the playoffs. Like, it's been an issue for them. So to be able to sort of skate through the regular season and be like, oh, we'll be fine come playoffs. See, that's where I don't agree with that, right? So, I mean, great to see Fraser Minton get in, and you're right. You're right. He had the opportunity. He was playing with a couple of big boys up there, but he buried it, right? Took advantage of his opportunity. And I threw Domi into the mix there when I said he's got a goose egg, but is Domi even a bottom 6 guy for the Leafs? Right? Like right now he's not. So, and Domi's always been that reverse Cy Young guy, like, low amount of goals, high amount of assists, at least over the last few seasons. He had a couple of years where he's buried the puck, but you talk about guys like Pontus Holmberg and, he gets that empty netter. That's great. But like, Reeves is in the lineup every night when he's not suspended. You get nothing for him, right? And then, of course, hits like that aren't going to help his case either. So I don't know if that's something that they address at some point here, or if it's just a matter of guys getting healthy. Maybe it's within the system, like a guy like Fraser Minton. Maybe they, give Steves another look down in the AHL. I know he's ripping it up down in the AHL. I know Grabenka, what's the kid's name? Grabenkov? That played last night. Am I saying it right? No. Grabenkin. Nikita Grabenkin. Maybe there's something there with him. I know he's been being decent down with the Marlies as well, but they have to find something. They've got to find somebody that's going to be able to put the puck in the net. Robertson's got 1 goal. 1 goal. Was this not a guy that, like, coming out of preseason, like a bunch of pundits are like, oh, he's going to score 20 to 25. You and I might have been those guys as well. Can't really remember.
It's still early, though. I don't know if he's
going to score 20. It's a quarter of the way through the season. It's not early.
Yeah, but I'm not saying he's going to pop off, but I mean his season, the way it all.
He's not scoring 15, Ari. He's not scoring 15. He'll be lucky to get to double digits. We can place a bet on this if you'd like.
Watch, we'll place a bet, and he'll be out for 6 months or something like that. But I think. By the way, it'll depend on Jarnkrok coming back. I realize he's not
coming back. He's not coming back.
Well, we'll see how that bottom 6 shapes up if he comes back prior to the playoffs or in playoff time. But the question is and you address all the options. Do they solve it in-house, or is there another guy they go out and get? Is there a guy in the system somewhere? I just hope they don't go out and try and make a trade for a bottom 6 guy.
Yeah, don't be trading assets for that. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you.
I think we talked about this in, one of our earlier episodes, like, the idea of Foligno and Plekanec and, Riley Nash. At the time, great idea. There's a whole bunch of other guys in that category that I'm talking about, these, pre-deadline or at deadline guys that were brought in to add depth to the bottom 6. And it's first of all, it's a big problem. One guy isn't going to change that whole problem. We're talking about 6 dudes underperforming, 6 players, right? So I think that they're just going to have to try. I think this comes down to coaching and line mixing, because I think they're going to have to go with what they got. And there's a reason why I like the idea of these players, because I think that they can produce. We've seen each and every one of those players, whether it be in the preseason or small snippets throughout their career, being able to be guys that produce. I think it'll come down to who they're playing with and when. Maybe there's a point in which some of the guys in the lineup end up dropping down when Matthews comes back, and that adds some offensive firepower to the bottom six. But you're right. They need to get it figured out. When you look at the other top teams in the league, I mentioned in the TikTok post, the Jets and the Rangers, their third line, both of those third lines have scored over 20 points combined, more points combined than the Leafs' entire bottom six. And we want to consider the Leafs in the same conversation as the Winnipeg Jets and the New York Rangers, other top teams. So in order to compete with those teams come April or whenever it might be, they're going to have to figure out a way to get some scoring depth. As far as we know, I say this out loud, and I'm like, well, they're at the top of the Atlantic. How bad could it be?
Regular season, bro. That's just the way it is, right? It's all leading up because again, the game changes come the playoffs. But getting beat, I would love for them to win the Atlantic, though, to be able to set themselves up in a position where they can avoid, perhaps one of the big boys in Florida or Boston or Tampa in the first round. Although the way the season's going right now, one of those teams might be, or at least Boston and Tampa might be a wild card team. You brought up that Rangers third line, by the way. They were fantastic the other night against the Canucks. Fantastic against the Canucks the other night. Like Cooley, Kapko, and Brodzinski. And the thing is what Brodzinski is centering that line right now because what's his name? Hedl? Am I saying it right? He's injured right now. Right. So we'll talk about a wealth of depth there for the New York Rangers. But again, that's a team that you could face, in a conference final. Right. And these could be the difference makers in those games. That's what we're talking about. Now, don't get me wrong. I would be for the Leafs trading for somebody to help shore that up. Now, it would be nice if you could convince a team to perhaps take a Nick Robertson off your hands, to bring in a guy. I'd be down with that. I'd be okay with that. I think Nick Robertson's time in Toronto is fizzling away, really. For as much as, last year people were like, oh, this guy, he just needs opportunity. And then he goes and bitches and moans in the lineup every single night, and he's doing fuck all right now. So to me, it just feels like, a change of scenery might be the best thing for him. So I'd be okay with somebody like, moving Nick Robertson perhaps, but when it comes down, don't be moving a first round pick, right? Keep your draft capital, right? At some point here, the Leafs are going to start turning guys over, right? And you're going to need these guys like the Fraser Mintons, like the Easton Cowans. What's the defense from the Ranford that they picked up last year? These are the guys that are expected to sort of turn over, because you don't want this team to just flatline and have nothing really, right? And then have to do a complete rebuild. So I would be okay with moving, somebody who perhaps needs a change of scenery like Nick Robertson, but I wouldn't be okay with moving, a good draft capital, because eventually you're going to need those guys. Because let's keep in mind too, Willie's going to be here for another 7 years after this, right? Morgan Riley's locked up. Matthews is somewhat locked up, but he's Matthews, so he's going to hit another home run, and he'll probably do it with the Maple Leafs as well, right? So this team is going to have a future moving forward. You want to make sure that those guys that are, the depth guys can sort of keep up. And I think the best way to do that is to have, those players that you draft and develop to be able to take those spots, right? So yeah, don't trade away draft capital. That is my point. But Nick Robertson, any takers? Perhaps? I don't know.
I guess the question though is that, let's say February rolls around. This team is, top of the, they're playing like they have been now, and we're still planning the parade. And the bottom six still aren't performing. What do you do? Would you change your tune on trading an asset?
Well, Easton Cowan's not getting traded. I'm not trading Fraser Minton as well. And again, let me just pull up their how much draft capital they have right now, because like, look at the Pittsburgh Penguins, right? And don't get me wrong, they've got Stanley Cups to show for it. So ultimately, they made the right decisions, really. But they're in hell right now. Like, yeah, the Leafs don't even have their first rounder for this year. So they can't trade that. They don't have their first or their fourth. And then moving forward, the next few years, they have their first round picks. But yeah, look at Pittsburgh, right? Like, Pittsburgh forever dealing off first round picks, deal them off, get them out there, and it worked out for them. They won a few cups, but now they're sitting there with Crosby, Letang, and Malkin, and they're awful. Like, they are awful. That's where the Leafs could be, X many years from now. If there's cups thrown into the mix, then other people could be like, who fucking cares about these first round picks? 10 years from now, we got 2 cups. Maybe there's an argument for that. But right now, for me, no, I wouldn't move draft capital, and I wouldn't move any of these, prospects that you like in Minton, Cowan, and perhaps even Ranford, although I know less about Ranford than I do about Cowan and Minton.
Isn't it crazy that we've gone through this long of the podcast and we haven't had to? There's been no reason to talk about the Leafs goaltending because it's been that solid.
It's been good.
We have nothing to say.
It's been good.
It's good.
It's good. Yeah.
Let's not
and look at the rotation.
Right.
Yeah.
I told this could be another Allmark Swayman situation.
Yeah. Just
maybe
none of the
year,
stupid fucking hugs, though, man. God, I hated that. So glad it's gone. Could not stand that. And seeing Swayman struggle in Boston right now, it shed a little tear for that. Yeah. No, I don't.
Well, I mean, he's not shedding any tears. He's laughing all the way to the bank. But they did. When you talk about that, a hug last night, didn't they?
Who's that?
Didn't I saw Stolarz and
I didn't catch it.
No, they did a bit of a
No. Oh.
Yeah. That's what I mean. The real Swayman. They don't have the whole. It's like not as. It's not as much of a. It's not as dramatic as Yeah, they just go in for the hug, but yeah. Anyway,
I'll tell you what. When Boston played Ottawa the first time, if those two went and hugged it out after the game, I would be all over my goaltender in the dressing room after that. There's no fucking way. I'm sorry, you guys are enemies now. Anyway, glad to see that's over. But since the Detroit game, which was what, on the 8th? Yeah. So not too, a couple weeks ago, it's been a steady rotation. Stolarz, Wall, Stolarz, Wall, Stolarz, Wall. So love seeing that. We'll see if they continue that, but no Saturday night game this week. They play the hockey club on Sunday, which, by the way, I would love Utah to just keep the name.
Totally.
Utah, totally. Like, what is that? UHC? Utah Hockey Club. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it.
Because it obviously gives us, it gives us soccer vibes, right?
Yeah.
And we all know that hockey has had some issues picking up attention on the world stage, mainly because Bettman won't send the NHL the Olympics. But anyway, I think it'd be great for the game. Right. It'd be great for the game for people who are unfamiliar with hockey. It would give them, it's given me soccer vibes. It would give a soccer fan soccer vibes, and maybe they might give hockey a chance. I think it's
Utah's
cool.
Smart, though. They're going to double dip, right? Like, every single person that bought a jersey this year now has to buy another one, then they become the Yeti next year. Because, like, let's face it, that's what they're going to be. It's going to be the Yeti, right? You not agree with that?
No, totally. It's going to be the Yeti.
Yeah. And it's going to be cool, too. Like, I like the name. Don't get me wrong. But, yeah, they're going to cash in again. So it's smart. That Ryan Smith guy there wears his hat backwards all the time. I like that guy. He's smart. So that is the Leafs ahead. We'll see what they do with the rotation with the goalies. I believe Stolarz will play against Utah. And then let's see who they get, because they go out on the road to Florida next week for Wednesday and Saturday tilts with the Panthers and the Lightning. That's where it's going to be interesting to see if they continue this sort of rotation, because if they go Stolarz against Utah, are they going Wall against the big boy Cats and then give it over to Stolarz against Tampa? We will have to see, but we'll talk about all of it on the next episode of The Passion. It is the delusion that unites us all. For Ari Daniel, I'm Andrew Wadden. Thanks for listening.